Welcome to episode.
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 Yep.
Welcome to episode 400 of Fly Away.
Woo!
Over the past few years, we have been reminded time and again how much the world relies on travel. From supporting local economies to learning about new cultures, the experience that travel provides helps to make our world smaller and bring us closer together. Here at Outlander Travel, we've been proud to be a small part of bringing that to you through our weekly podcast. And if you'd like to see what we're talking about, be sure to check out our YouTube channel by searching for Fly Away Podcast. My name is Sandy, and this week I am joined by fellow Outlander travel agents, Elizabeth, Donna, and George. In case you're wondering, 400 episodes of a weekly podcast equals about 7 years and 9 months. So like a second grader.
It's just about as mature as a second grader.
Yeah, right. So we've covered a lot of topics over the years, and we thought it would be fun to think back on the ones that have stuck with us. And we're going to put links in the show notes so they'll be easy to find. And we have pictures of the cover photos too. So let's get started. So one of the things I wanted you guys to think about, we've had a lot of good guests on the show. And so I kind of wanted to go over, or like think back, who were some of our favorites. And I will go first since I'm hosting.
Well, I will say one thing I've learned during this process of preparing for this episode, not that I did a lot to prepare for it, but Sandy has a better memory than any of us. So I think we can all agree.
Well, okay. So the first two people I want to bring up, though, I think it's really cool because first, going way back to episode 32 when we had Ron Wahoola, and Ron was the leader of our local Galloway running group. And he touched a lot of people in Raleigh. The group was huge at the time, like 800 people. And he went and did Everest, and he was climbing to base camp the year that there was a large earthquake. And, it was pretty bad. And they didn't make it to base camp. They made it close. And then they had to hike back down to where the airport was, and then to go back down into Nepal. And it took them several days of not having phone service, not talking to his wife, telling him, she kind of knew he was okay because of the company they used. But so that was crazy. And then we also have Kilimanjaro. We had Chris D'Souza on for Kilimanjaro. So to me, I thought that was really cool that we had two of those huge bucket lists. Like, I'm going to go climb one of the biggest mountains in the world.
So George live vicariously through them, so I don't have to climb them now. So.
Oh, but I think go back and listen to both of those. They were amazing. But I loved Ron talking about the logistics of the climb too. And Chris did too. She talked about the things they did to get ready for something like that. Just kind of the things that were going through their mind while it was happening. It really tests you. And I just thought that was super cool.
Yeah, I agree. Ron, we could have listened to him all night. And he actually, if I recall, he came and hung out with us while we came and recorded in person. So that was really nice too. We don't get that very often, ever. Mm-hmm. I don't know that we've ever had that again with a guest.
I don't think we have again. Yeah.
Yeah. So for me, I'm very nerdy about this, and I didn't even think about it when I mentioned it, but my two favorite guests were talking about flying. We're talking about planes. We had a pilot on, Laura's friend Peter, and we talked to him so much and asked him so many questions that we actually had to break that episode into 2 episodes because it wouldn't fit in one audio file to upload. It was that long. Yeah. And he was just so fascinating. And he gave us all these little secrets that you always wonder, what's it like to be a pilot? How do they do this? And he does long haul flights. So that was really interesting. And then we had Robbie Hamida on, who he's been a frequent guest of ours now at this point, I think we can safely say. Yeah. But I believe it was the first time we had him on, and he talked about, how airline booking works and how pricing works and how just the logistics of an airline ticket and the history of airline tickets and ticketing and all of that. And I just found that really fascinating because it is such a, this industry is one of the first ones that became computerized, but they were operating before computers too, and managing large amounts of data in the ways they did it. It was just really fascinating.
It's an extremely complex system, and Robbie he makes it sound easy.
Mm-hmm.
He's such an airplane geek too, he'll do those things where, if he hears a certain airplane is gonna not fly again, he'll go and book the last flight. You know, it's funny that people dig that deep into it.
And he's been doing this a very long time, so he really knows his stuff, and he knows that history. So those were my two favorites, and I didn't even think about the fact that they were both dealing with airplanes. But I think that a lot of the reason that I found them to be so fascinating is because it's always been a mystery to me. I've always loved planes too, but I haven't taken the time to like learn all of the, the background stuff, and they made me regret that. And I was really glad to get the easy Reader's Digest version of it from them.
Well, and Peter, I remember one of the things he talked about. We're like, what, like some of these, like when we're on a long flight to Europe, where you try to sleep,
Yeah.
So what do you do? And then he talked about how there was like a little bed up there that the pilots switch off, and that was really cool. Yeah, that was cool.
It made me feel a lot better because I always wondered how my pilot didn't get sleepy.
Yeah, exactly. So George and Donna, you both had the same person as one of yours.
And we didn't even confer
No.
confer with each other. No. Carolyn Belcher, who did the fairy tale travel in the little towns in Germany. And, Germany's one of my favorite places to go visit anyway. But it was just, now there's a bunch of more cities that I have to go to in Germany.
Well, and she also came back and did another, so she's with the German National Tourist Office, and she's based in Florida. And she came back on and did another episode on Oktoberfest, which was really cool too.
Yes.
And she's based in Florida, but she is German. So, she's adorable. She's so enthusiastic. She loves her country and she loves sharing it. So if you didn't want to go to Germany before, listen to those episodes. You will absolutely 100% want to go.
And I have to go back.
Yeah.
Again.
Yeah. I have to go back too because my time in Germany was spent in a hotel. So I didn't get to do anything.
Yeah. We do have to have her back on too, because she has all kinds of, itineraries she can talk about and all sorts of things. So yeah.
It'd be cool to get a post-COVID update because Germany was pretty strict.
Yeah,
So I also have honorable mentions. I've got two. Devin Singley, he was at the time the brewer at the local brewery for me. And now he's at Fortnite. But he came on. He's also a Disney geek. And he had just come back and was, at the bar talking about all the beers at Epcot. And I was like, oh, you got to come on the podcast.
I love that. I had totally forgotten about that episode, hence why I said you have a better memory. And I saw it on the list. I was like, oh, yeah, that was a great episode. We should have him back on as well.
Well, and he used to be a librarian. So, I mean, he might as well join Outlander Travel and start selling travel. And then Kevin Betijavis, she's a friend of mine who is gluten-free. And she came on and talked about the challenges of traveling and trying to be gluten-free. And she really focused on Europe, which she had been, she'd done a couple trips there, which now to me is really cool going back because my daughter is now gluten-free. And so it's just, you don't, unless you're doing it, you don't realize, but Europe is really good about it. So really cool.
Eastern Europe is not so good.
Okay. Well,
so
yeah.
I mean, you're lucky that they have, crackers and things like that. It's, and they have bread. So you kind of take what you can get when you get into parts of Eastern Europe and the Eastern Bloc.
Okay, I'll take your word for it because I've only been to Central Europe, and I wasn't worried about gluten when I did it either.
Yeah, modern Europe, I think you're pretty good on that one.
Modern Europe, I don't think is the word you were looking for. I think you're looking for Western Europe.
Okay, Western Europe. There you go.
Western Europe is modern.
It's getting there.
So one of the other things that I do a lot is if I am talking to a client and they're gonna say they're going to take a cruise that I took, I'll send them the podcast and I'll listen to it again just to hear, so I'll be able to answer their questions or know what they're talking about. So I think it's pretty cool to actually relive things through the podcast. So that was another question I asked you guys. So George, what did you pick on what your favorite thing that you relived just by having that experience of talking about it on the podcast?
So for me, it was the Alaska cruise that we did a few years ago. It was, for a lot of people, Alaska is always a bucket list item. And I was surprised we got there as early as we did. I didn't really expect to do it for a few more years, but it was great. And every once in a while I catch that episode and listen to a little bit of it while I'm doing something else. And yeah, it was great.
Yeah, I know. Alaska was mine too that I picked. It's the Fairbanks trip that Lindsay and I did. So too bad she's not on here today. Because we did so many things on that trip. It just like it was one of those work trips where they just crammed so much in and it was really cool. So I like going back and remembering. What about yours, Donna? Did you have one?
I did. It was when Lindsay and I went to Bali
Oh, that's right.
because it was such a different place. I mean, this is my first time I'd ever been in a country that was not a Christian country. It's a Hindu country, and so it was quite interesting to see the clash of cultures and see how they really make it work. And it's just a different kind of feeling. And the sculptures, I mean, they've got giant sculptures that are like several stories tall as you're just driving down the street. And it's just so different. And it really just put a huge impression on me.
Elizabeth, do you have one? You didn't kind of.
No, I honestly, every time I get to come on the podcast and talk about a trip that I've taken any of that makes me enjoy the trip again. And I don't go back and listen to them as often just because I'm so busy. But when I have had the opportunity to, any time that I've talked about a trip that I've taken, it's worth listening to again for me. It sounds like a cop out, I know, but because you forget so much about, in a way it's really like this has become a journal for me because I don't keep a travel journal. And so I get to come on and talk about it fairly soon, usually after I do the trip. And so there are things that I forget about that now live on in this podcast that I can listen to again. So I really couldn't narrow it down. I think maybe any time that one of my kids came on to talk about a trip we took would be my favorites, but that's because they're my kids and that's, that's how life is.
Yeah, but that's there for them, like they might forget and they can go back and listen to that.
Exactly. Of course they won't because they're teenagers and, oh, Mom, we were so stupid.
It's like my kids forget I'm even on a podcast and I've been doing it for 7 and a half years. It's like, yeah, okay.
Crazy.
Oh, we can't go out to dinner tonight because Mom has podcast.
Yes, exactly. So something that surprised you was something that you guys learned about that you didn't really know about before we did the podcast on it. Donna, why don't you go for that one?
Well, my favorite episodes are about the stupid mistakes that we've all made. Because you know what? I realize I'm with my peeps. It's not just me that forgets their hairbrush and their toothbrush and their underwear, So
maybe the underwear is just you, actually.
But no, I mean, making these like travel mistakes and we get to laugh about it. But you know what? These are things that other people have experienced and we realize we're really not alone. We've all been through it.
So George, you put on here Emerald Waterways, which actually at the time that we're recording this, I don't think it's aired yet.
It's not yet, so stay tuned. You'll get to hear it. But,
well, by the time this airs, that will have aired. So.
It will. Yep.
Just a few episodes ago.
Yeah.
So when I saw the show notes, and I'm thinking, Emerald Waterways, who is that? I had just absolutely never heard of them. And listen to that episode. It was like, wow, this sounds like, for me, in the way that I'm not a foo-foo-y kind of person. I'd rather wear jeans and a t-shirt to dinner. Most river cruises, although they're not all like that, they do kind of have the impression that, they're a little hoity-toity. And so when Lindsay came in and talked about Emerald, it was like, wow, that's exactly the kind of river cruise I want to do. And the pricing is super reasonable and the itineraries are great. And so I honestly have been on their site quite a few times trying to see if I could squeeze one in this year.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, because the pricing's so good. And so we'll see.
I do think the pricing is pretty good this year in particular.
It is.
Yeah.
They're trying to ramp everything up and get people back over there.
Just a little pro tip that Emerald is owned by Scenic, and it's their lower cost item. But twice now I've tried to put clients who would have priced well for Emerald onto Emerald and it's been sold out, but then Scenic has had very good prices, so I've been able to put them on Scenic. So just a little hint, that I think Emerald sells out a little bit faster, at least in the before times, because of the price point, and then whatever inventory is left. And these are usually fairly last minute, in the next 2 to 6 months that these folks want to travel. So a little pro tip for you.
So the one I picked for this one was Trek Travel. The one we had them come on and talk about their biking trips, which I had no idea. You could take a biking trip. You could have anywhere from glamping to nice hotels. You know, people who aren't even, I mean, they have trips for people who are, you know, avid bikers and want to be like really fit. And then they got kind of motorized bikes for the people who just want to be along with them. And they had just kind of something for everybody that I thought that was so cool. I had no idea. And they supply the bikes, you know, like that to me seemed like something that would be really fun, and added it to my list of things I want to do. Does one come to mind for you, Elizabeth?
So actually, this is going to sound really funny, but the ones that surprised me the most are actually our fun little game show, the Two Truths and a Lie. Because I learned so much about these destinations, because we find these weird facts that, you know, with the exception of Pittsburgh, which I had no interest in learning more about.
You weren't even on the podcast. Did you at least listen to it?
Yes. And I mean, it's a fun way to learn too, but I think as somebody who really enjoys trivia, you sort of go into these things and you're like, I'm going to figure them all out. And then, I mean, except for Sandy does sort of
I did that the first time. I have not been doing that.
But it surprises me. I think when we, you know, we do these places that we really think we know a lot about, and we learn some. And even when I was writing the ones that I wrote, you know, the London, or I learned things, you know, right. I found little bits of information that I didn't know before, and some things I probably don't ever want to know, but there you go. So I think that's where the surprise comes from, the fact that you wouldn't think that these little fun episodes that we're doing just, you know, to learn a little bit more about a destination would really enlighten me to a destination.
So has anybody picked a bucket list that they, you know, because they've listened to or been on one of these podcasts, something you want to add? I mean, I know the bucket list gets bigger and bigger all the time.
Well, not because of the podcast. It's been on my list for since the last Emperor came out in the 80s or the early 90s. I've wanted to go to China and see the Forbidden City in Beijing. And so, you know, that's been on my list most of my life. So
we had that when our older Disney rep, Freddie, came on and talked about his China Adventures by Disney. They went to the Forbidden City, and he talked about that.
But yeah, it was on the list long before Freddie.
Yeah, I think that's the only episode we've really done on China, isn't it? Really?
We've done Hong Kong.
Yeah, we did.
But I think you're right.
I guess you have to go, Donna, so that we can.
You know what? 2024.
Yeah, you gotta go.
I haven't developed a new bucket list for anything, because I think most of the places that I haven't gone yet that I kind of want to go to, we haven't really talked about yet. So a lot of the places, I mean.
Well, you got to go to Africa.
I did.
That was pretty cool.
I did, but that episode didn't. So is that the question? Is what did we do that was on our bucket list? It
was something that sparked your bucket list.
Yeah. So I don't think maybe I sparked your bucket list for, for Africa, but I got to do that before we had really podcasted about Africa at all. I think we'd had Nataba on once, so maybe that did a little bit, but and maybe actually Donna and Lindsay's podcast on their trip to Bali, that might have done a little bit of that as well. That's a part of the world I don't know terribly much about. So,
George, you had put the Christmas markets on Waterways.
Yeah, so kind of my long-term original bucket list item has always been Japan. Always been fascinated. I love the series Shogun. I can't tell you how many times I've seen that in The Last Samurai, and always been intrigued by their culture and would love to explore the old castles and that sort of stuff. But directly related to the show and being now involved in travel, it's been a Christmas market cruise really on almost any river line. Just the idea of hitting them up with all the Christmas decorations and the food and the cool weather and maybe a little bit of snow. Just, I don't know. There's something about that just appeals to me.
Well, George, Japan is another destination we haven't really talked about very much on this podcast. So I think your job to inspire us.
My mission, if I choose to accept
it.
Exactly. Yeah, once again, we've done, I think, exactly one episode on Japan.
Yeah. Exactly.
We talk more about Japanese toilets than we do Japan.
That's not a lie. That is not
I don't think
lie.
I've heard that one. I'll have to go back.
We had one in our hotel, and Paris.
Yes.
Japanese toilet.
Mhm.
Yeah, that was funny. I didn't put one down here. That's interesting. I'm looking through. Yeah, I didn't put a bucket list, but like I said, my bucket list keeps getting longer and longer.
I think we end every episode with Sandy saying Outlander retreat. So I feel like every episode inspires you in some way.
So a couple of my honorable mentions that I look back at and I really like. We've done actually 2 of these, but we did a So You Want to Be a Travel Agent, because we get asked that question all the time. So we wanted to kind of give people the nitty gritty, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I send those to people. When I have people ask me about it, I'm like, listen to this and then come talk to me. If you're still interested, I'm happy to talk to anybody about it. But, you know, it's kind of like one of those things where you got to kind of know the real scoop on it. And then but I'm prepping for this. I went back and listened to episode 1.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up. How was that?
It was actually pretty good. I mean, I thought it was going to be like terrible sound, and no, it was good. It was really good. Go back and listen from the beginning.
I have never listened to episode 1. I'll have to go check it out.
Yeah. I did re-listen to maybe the first 10 several years ago, just to actually really to compare the sound, because, you know, we've had people say, well, I stopped listening because the sound was so bad. And of course, you know, it's, you know, one of the things George has done is help us improve that. You know, we had let's just be honest. We had no idea what we were doing. We literally were like, let's get on Skype.
I was letting you do it all. I was just showing up. So I really don't know how the sausage gets made.
Yeah. And it was definitely one of those things where like, we're just going to record it and see how it goes. And we had technical issues. There were, you know, we didn't realize how bad our Wi-Fi was sometimes. I mean, like we didn't know what was causing the problem, because we had no background in that, you know, and it was like 5 of us, I think, when we started, which was most of the agency at the time.
Right. And it wasn't always regular, and we didn't have the planning meeting, so we'd be scrambling for topics.
Yes. Although when you say it wasn't regular, when we first started, we were recording every Monday night for an episode. We did 1 episode every week, and we did that for like a year before we finally went, you know, this probably is not the most effective way.
I'm like, we could probably do 2 in one day.
Yeah.
And here we are doing 3 tonight.
Yes, so a little behind the scenes stuff. But I think that it was such a learning curve, but people have asked me, you know, how did you start your podcast? And literally, I was like, Sandy wouldn't shut up, and so we had to do it. I was like, she would not let it alone. And I was like, I have no idea how to do this. She was like, let's just do it. And so, I mean, that's literally.
I'm glad that you have more of a techie brain, because I didn't know what GarageBand was. And when were we doing it on Garage?
Yeah, we were using Skype and GarageBand. Yeah.
Kudos. And it sounded good. I mean, I do know we had complaints about sound, and that probably, if I'm remembering correctly, I feel like we had to record the first one twice because something happened with the sound.
Possible.
I think we had to redo it.
7 years. 7 years and 9 months, I believe you said.
Yeah, it was like, you know, a second grader again.
Yeah.
And it's amazing to get this far, because I listen to a lot of podcasts about podcasting, and the vast majority of podcasts never get past 2 or 3 episodes.
Yeah.
Well, we are persistent.
Yeah, they expect to get hundreds, if not thousands, of listeners after 3 or 4 weeks, and when they get one.
Here we are at episode 400, and we still only have like 20.
That's our secret of our success. We are persistent, and we don't really care if no one's listening.
I think that's, you know, honestly, when it comes to the motivation for creating a podcast, it has to be internal. Like our main purpose for this is for our own education and for, you know, having something to refer clients to. So the fact that if anybody else is out there getting something out of it, that's just gravy. So, yeah.
And if you are, drop us a note on like our Facebook group or something. Let us know you're out there. From you. Yeah, we really would.
Go like our videos.
I have gotten a lot of feedback from you guys, and from our previous editor as well, from Heidi, about not saying the episode number in each one. But I'm really proud of our episode numbers, and I feel like it's really important that people know, you know, that we didn't just start doing.
We're not fly by night.
Yeah, we've been around for a while, and you know, you don't get to episode 400 and not brag about it, but I don't know, episode 324 is kind of important too, and so is episode 216, and you know, that every time we do it, I feel like it's worth making sure, you know, we state that.
So Donna, you had put here kind of your honorable mention ones were the travel shaming and vacation shaming episodes.
Oh yeah, because like I said, it's all, it makes me feel better that, it's not just me.
Then people say it to you too, like, "Oh, you're traveling again."
Well, no, it's travel. Yeah, well, it is some of that, but it's also, hey, what is the stupid thing that I did? What is the stupid thing that you did? And knowing that we're all stupid, and that really helps, at least in my book.
Yeah, I think we're all a certain level of crazy to do what we do. And travel.
Yeah, we forget things. What are the things that you can't live without? But then what are the things that we can't live without because we know we've forgotten them before?
Mm-hmm.
Those kinds of things. And so that just, I think it makes me personally feel better. And I hope it makes our listeners feel better too, that, we're not perfect. Mm-hmm. Far from it.
Well, I remember the travel shaming or vacation shaming. It was episode 73. So that was a long time ago. And I had just read this article about I think it focused on millennials not taking their vacation time at work because of the way people kind of would, I don't know, act like they needed to be there to get their work done. I wonder how much that's changed after COVID and if people are a little bit, I don't know, now so many people are working from home, and I think once you get into that kind of mindset, maybe you will take your vacation. I don't know.
Well, although we also see now that people can work from home, I mean, this actually is a pretty good idea for a topic, as I'm saying it out loud. Mm-hmm. That, over COVID, we learned we could work from anywhere, right? And so people were taking those staycations or those workcations where they would go to an all-inclusive resort for 2 weeks and work, and from a very nice location. And so now it's like, okay, well, are we all going to always be expected to work while on vacation? Like, you can take your computer with you as long as you have Wi-Fi. And I am getting more and more clients tell me that cruise has to have good Wi-Fi because I have to work. I can't take off work. And I'm hearing that way more now than I did 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That happened to my husband with his work went from like 6 weeks vacation to what they call permissive leave, which is take what you need, but he doesn't take 6 weeks anymore. So
yeah, I mean, none of us we always have our phones, we have our laptops, our tablets, and
but just because we have to suffer, that doesn't mean the whole world should have to. I mean, and honestly, it's something that I'm trying to find ways not to do. To have to, like, I'm going on vacation. It's work, actually, in a week, and I'm going to take my laptop with me, but I intend to open it very infrequently. And I've put measures in place to make that happen, but it's taken me 10 years to get to that. I've definitely spent entire vacations working, and I know you all have. Yep. So yes. I don't ever want that to be my norm, like, forever and ever. It has to happen as you build the business, but then eventually, and I'm passionate about that with other people too. So the travel shaming that episode was really interesting to me as well, because I think we've all felt it one way or another, that that pressure to work. And what I see now, it trends toward, well, you can work from anywhere. You want to work from home, well, then you can work on vacation too. I really feel like that may be.
But I think it's, when I first started doing this and I would go on a cruise, everything got turned off. Like I was not connected at all. Now I get the Wi-Fi, I turn my phone on in every port, I get, so I do that to myself though, like I don't disconnect like I used to. And yeah, I don't know. I feel like we're all just kind of wired in like that. I still get to travel a lot, so I feel like I can check my email on my trip. It's fine.
Yeah, not complaining. Exactly.
And if I don't clean up my email as I go, it's going to be ridiculous when I get home.
And that's the other thing. So I try to do that. But then I really try my darndest not to work on Saturdays and Sundays.
Yeah, that's good.
It doesn't always work. And I have clients, of course, now that's all gets thrown out the window when somebody's actually in destination traveling. Mm-hmm. But I don't do new proposals. I don't do new stuff on my weekends.
Anybody have any other episodes that they're remembering now that we've kind of been chatting about it? No, that's it.
I'm a newbie.
Well, I do have to say, I kind of like having guests on the show.
Yeah.
I mean, I know that people probably get tired of hearing our voices, but it's always nice to have a fresh perspective and a fresh voice from somebody who is a destination management company or a tour operator or a guest. Like we had Project Expedition who does shore excursions and things like that. We've had several guests on the show that they basically can talk about their business. They can talk about destinations. They can talk about some of the ins and outs that really bring it to life. And some of those are great guests, great speakers.
Yeah. Or someone that's like a professional or like an expert in their field, like the woman that did the packing and the style tips and stuff.
Yes. But I was personally thinking of like the ladies up from like Anchorage.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
They were probably an honorable mention for me for favorite guests. I mean, the Alaskans are great anyway. I've just never met an Alaskan I didn't like, and they're so enthusiastic. So yeah.
Yes, and that enthusiasm is contagious.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's the wrap. Episode 400.
Yay!
That's our show for this week.
Go do 401.
Yeah. Thanks for hanging out with us. Please like our Facebook page, rate us, and be sure to tell your friends about us. You can find our previous episodes on the podcast page of outlandertravel.com, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. We would love to hear from you, and don't forget to like and subscribe and tell your friends about our YouTube channel. On behalf of Donna, George, Elizabeth, and myself, Sandy, thanks for joining us this week. Gotta fly.